Some fossils and a little deep time in this NGSS assessment. The question is, can you dig it?
Got an Earth and Space performance expectation here for deep time, and you can see constructing explanations is a big practice we're looking for here, talking about deep time, and obviously the scale proportion quantities are a cross-cutting concept. The other performance expectation we're trying to assess here is the life science standard for biological evolution, and the idea is fossil record. Trying to understand the placement of fossils in the fossil record, and how concepts like diversity, extinction can be seen in different rock layers. So both are dealing with rock layers and evidence in layers of rock. This one specifically is looking at patterns, and so the assessment is going to focus a lot on how can we pull out patterns, and a way to organize students' knowledge, how they can pull patterns out and create explanations, because as you'll notice here, there's also this idea of, in connections to the nature of science, an idea of science knowledge is based upon logical and conceptual connections between evidence and explanations. Because this one includes explanations and this one includes explanations, later on you're going to see a claim, evidence, reasoning type of organization of students' knowledge. Students did an activity by themselves first, where they had to organize some events in Earth's history, and then we tried to place them on a line. This activity served as the anchoring phenomenon for this assessment because it caused us to ask, how do we know what happened in the past, and how can we find out more? We had some conversations about this image and talked about complexity, anatomy, patterns, and I asked students to identify patterns, had some conversations about these concepts. At the same time, we also looked at some extinction intensity graphs, had some conversations about how this relates to this, and how we can use the fossil record to understand past events. The students were ready to dig. What they did is they dug up different fossils. Each student dug one fossil, and we measured the depth that they found the fossil. And then they each created a sticky note with their fossil on it, and a prediction of what they thought their fossil was after some research. And then we created a fossil profile, as you can see here. We had many discussions along the way, like we found some index fossils, and then we also found this red soil layer, just some red sand that I bought at the store. But basically, the understanding was we had to do chemical analysis on this red soil layer, and we had found iridium in the red soil layer, and we kind of talked about the KT boundary. The students to do pretty much the same thing they're asked to do in the summative assessment. They're going to be using their own fossil in the summative assessment, and so in the formative assessment, we gave them the fossil, we gave them the claim, what the fossil was meant to be, and we provided the kind of fossil profile that they did as a class. And so what students had to do is basically come up with the claim, evidence, and reasoning to be able to show that the fossil that the student found was a turritella fossil. We got in some good conversations about what is evidence, what is reasoning. That was some feedback that was given along the way. We had some feedback on what is good evidence, what's considered good evidence, what's considered evidence that may be less useful, and then how do we write reasoning? To guide them in kind of a scaffold we provided for the reasoning was a checklist, and so they had to check as many scientific principles as they felt like they could use beforehand, try to use those in their reasoning, and then come back and reflect, did they use them, and they would use the rubric to kind of self-assess. Did they use two pieces of evidence that was clear and logical? Did they provide reasoning, two pieces of reasoning connecting the evidence to the claim? And then the rest of the check marks here were based on their class slideshow. In the summative assessment, they had to make a claim, what they thought their creature was. They had to also make a claim by placing 3 pictures, and they got their pictures from a slideshow that they created. This was a shared notebook, class notebook, shared with all 80 students, where everyone documented their finding and predictions. You can see this was found at 5.5 centimeters, and the predictions were a cave bear. And you can see here's a different example of something that was found at 32 centimeters, and their prediction was an ammonite. Only evidence was allowed to be placed and needed to be cited. And they took this, cut it out, pasted it onto this organizer, provided evidence and reasoning, and the assessment was graded with the exact same rubric that was in the formative assessment.